Hey everyone, I am Dylan Mitchell, and this is the Rincon Horizons podcast, where we talk about what it means to reach the summit on your leadership journey. We want to help you lead better so your organization can climb higher. Welcome back to the Rincon Horizons podcast. We pick up this conversation in the middle of a conversation with Rincon Aerospace managing partner, Todd Dylan. This is part 2 of our first episode on leadership. And we want to rewind just a few minutes into part 1 from last time and hear Todd's story on his leadership corner, because we believe that it's so important to the rest of this part 2 episode. Thanks for joining us. That is such a powerful image, and it really is, just to hear you share the thought process behind it as well. You know, turning corners, not just climbing up. Can you maybe share one or two of those corners from your own leadership journey?
Sure. Let's talk about a leadership corner in my journey. We're going to go back. Wow, it's been, I guess, more than 20 years. It's hard to imagine it's been that long. But started on the F-35 program. I was the system design lead more than 20 years ago, and I remember a time in a really early design meeting for the F-35. I was leading the systems team for the flight control actuation system at the time, and we were having a large meeting over the course of a couple days with people from several companies. It was pretty early in my leadership career. And I kind of think I was probably talking a bit too much in this big meeting. You know, I was pretty confident in my abilities and my opinions at the time, Dylan. You know, in other words, I was pretty arrogant. I can admit that now, right? I was pretty arrogant, but also I saw things very, very black and white. You know, any topic, any decision that came up, you know, it was either completely right or completely wrong. You know, you were with me and we were together, or you're an idiot because you couldn't figure it out, right? That's kind of the way Todd saw things. I can say that now. So at the time in this large meeting we were having, the vice president for engineering for the company I was working for at the time was at the meeting. And he was a mentor of mine at the time. He really invested a lot in helping me grow as a leader. And I remember distinctly that day, we kind of finished the first morning of the meeting. He kind of pulled me aside, and I'm thinking, okay, what do I do now? You know, he looks at me like leaders do, and he says, okay, Todd, you're very, very black and white. You need to see more gray. And I can still hear him saying it to me today. And I'd love to say that, you know, I took that advice and I snapped into it and I became a better leader. That is not what happened. I didn't just take that advice and run with it. So I'll see if I can explain, you know, the immature thought process I had at the time, and maybe how I've grown as I've kind of rounded that leadership corner. I'm sure you've heard, and our listeners have heard, this idea about relative truth. You know,
sure.
You have your truth, I got my truth. Everybody's got their own truth, right? Well, I was so opposed to that idea, and by the way, I still am, this idea of relative truth. And I just assumed immediately that that's what this leader was talking to me about. He was talking about relative truth. I'm like, I want nothing to do with relative truth. What do I need to see the gray? It's right or it's wrong, you know. And I'm an engineer, right? Gravity's true. If I jump out of an airplane without a parachute, or you do, if we both do, we're both going to fall and die. Right. That's what we're going to do.
That's what I was going to say. As an engineer,
right.
Relative truth and black and white, that's kind of how you think, right?
It's how you think. It's what I was taught. It's how I thought, right? And, you know, it's true for all of us. If we jump out of that airplane, we're gonna die, right? Whether or not you agree. This is true in so many aspects of our lives. But over time, what I began to realize, my mentor wasn't talking about relative truth at all. That wasn't his point. His point, he was talking about business and about organizational leadership, okay? Now, like I said, gravity may be universally true, right? Like you said, I was an engineer. Most things about designing an aircraft, people may think most things about designing an aircraft are pretty black and white. You know, you just do an equation and it works. The reality is that's not true. You can think about things like, how should we structure the teams to design and manufacture this aircraft? That's not black and white universally true. Even something more technical, like what's the optimal architecture that balances performance and safety for that aircraft? That's not black and white. It's not like that. And my mentor could see that I had applied the laws of physics and math to everything in my world, right? I thought I could answer any question or solve any problem with an equation. Well, what I learned in leadership over time is that people don't work like that. You can't
Sure.
just apply a formula to say this is how a person's going to work, right? And while I certainly believe then and believe now leaders should be decisive, they should never assume they've cornered the market on wisdom. Right?
That's good.
One of the best things any leader can do is listen to other people, other opinions. And that's especially true when those other opinions are different from yours. Great leaders are never threatened by people who are smarter than them or who know or people who know more than they know. I mean, arrogant people like I was then, I was threatened by that, but real leaders aren't, right? Real leaders aren't threatened by that. Great leaders welcome those conversations and they see them as opportunities to grow and get smarter themselves. And I think that's what my mentor was saying to me that day. Todd, you need more gray. You need to have some fuzzy conversations with people who don't agree with you and not just shoot off your mouth thinking you know everything in the world. And I think that's what he was telling me. And that conversation, that leadership corner, was more than 20 years ago. And I think I'm still learning from that wisdom in that simple statement today.
Man, that's incredible. That's wow. I want listeners to go back and hopefully, whatever platform you're listening on, I know some of them have the option to bookmark an audio clip. Just that statement that leaders should be decisive, but they should never assume they have cornered the market on wisdom. I think there's a lot of truth in that, regardless of at what level you find yourself leading.
Thank you, Dylan.
So we thought it'd be fitting to kick things off with just the two of us here today on this inaugural episode. But in future episodes, we'll be bringing on some guests, and then one recurring segment that you'll see in every episode is something we're calling the Leadership Corner. So Todd, you want to talk a little bit about what that is?
Sure. And I hope I'm not scaring off any future guests here, but because there's a number of contacts I've made, people I've worked with that I'd love to have on the show. And I'll say, but when you come on, we're going to ask you about a leadership corner, and it's not all about sunshine and unicorn and roses in leaderships, right? We all make mistakes, and we want you to talk about, something that happened in your life, in your career, could be in business, like I said, could be in any aspect, could be in school, in your family, where some lesson you learned, some corner you turned as a leader that you used to get better, to make yourself a better leader, to make the organizations you are. So that's what this segment's about navigating those things in good ways, bad ways, and how that impacted your journey, your leadership journey to become a better leader and to lead organizations better. So that's what this is about. And that's it. And we'll ask all those guests to do that.
I know that, for me personally, that's one of my big things that I'm looking forward to hearing on this show. I think that, you have a lot of podcasts that'll have guests on in certain capacities, and you get their keynote speech or a abbreviated version of it whenever they're asked to come and do shows like this. But to get the chance to ask these leaders that are going to be well-known leaders in this industry and in other industries, what is your leadership takeaway? What's your leadership advice? Just very practical nuggets of wisdom. That's going to be really exciting.
And if I could, maybe Dylan, since I know you're going to moderate this podcast, but maybe since we don't have another guest, would you be willing to share one of your leadership corners today on this podcast before we go any further?
Wow, put me on the spot.
Yeah, you know it. Let's put you on the spot.
Todd knows a little bit about my background. I'm a production and AV geek from a past life. So I'm very, very comfortable in the background to be not seen and not heard. But for you, Todd, I'm more than happy to. I'd love to.
I appreciate it, Dylan. Yeah, talk about a corner in your leadership journey.
Sure. So a few years ago, this is probably 2019, I moved across the country to help plant a church in Phoenix, Arizona. And my role was to lead the creative team, creative director, branding, communications, worship environment. If you're familiar with the church world, all of those things. And it was exciting and terrifying all at once. We had people coming in from different states, different backgrounds, and none of us really knew each other. And then if you're familiar with the timeline of 2019, 2020, I'm sure you kind of know what's coming next. On top of just all of that, while we were trying to build this thing, a global pandemic strikes.
Ouch.
Ouch is the delicate way.
You could pick the worst time to start a church or an organization or anything, or move across the country. What a terrible time.
What a terrible time.
What a terrible time.
And to that point, like there's no playbook for that, right? And you can pick up books now and listen to podcasts of leaders, ironically, who, led through the pandemic, and they have all these nuggets of wisdom now. And so we had to figure out how to build trust and create culture and do meaningful work, all while we're separated by screens and time zones and 6 feet of space and masks. It was a lot. And ultimately, unfortunately, the church just didn't make it. COVID hit hard, and even though there were a lot of factors beyond our control, it was still one of those moments where I had to stop and ask myself, what role did I play? As a leader, that's something I've learned you always have to do, even when the failure wasn't directly your fault, right? You have to look back and ask, what could I have done better? What did I learn from this?
And that's kind of hard, but I think it's a key thing leaders do to not want to blame somebody else, but to say, what could I have done different? So I think that's good advice.
Well, and playing the blame game, it's a game no one wins.
Right.
And so what I learned from that season is this: leadership is always about people over process. And process matters, systems matter. You can have the most beautiful branding, the tightest, worship set, the cleanest Sunday experience. But if you don't value the people who make all of that possible, it's eventually going to fall apart. The processes only work if the people behind them feel seen, supported, and cared for. And so that was my biggest takeaway from an experience that I didn't go the way I had hoped. And that thing, fortunately, has shaped how I approach everything now. My business, my family, even my personal habits. These days, life looks a little different. My design studio, DM Supply, is just me. I don't have a team to lead, at least not in the traditional sense. But I do lead myself, and more importantly, I lead at home. My family is absolutely the most important team I'll ever get the privilege to be a part of. Balancing multiple clients, creative projects, and still trying to be a good husband and a dad can feel impossible some days. And a good project management platform helps, but my daughter, who's almost 8 months old, simply does not care what is on my base camp project for the day. She just wants dad.
Kids are kind of like that. They kind of humble us, don't they?
And she's my first, so I'm learning that.
Wow.
So I've had to adjust my rhythms. I wake up an hour earlier than everyone else in the house, just time for a quick devotional, a quick workout, maybe a cup of coffee before the day starts, and I'm not just thrown into the chaos of the day. It's not glamorous, and by no means is it always easy, especially after something like a cross-country flight where I'd much rather just sleep in. But that intentional choice of showing up early to lead myself sets the tone for my work and my family for the rest of the day. I know you mentioned earlier Top Gun. There is a line in the OG Top Gun. I might be a little bit of a purist.
A little bit, just a little bit. Huh?
Not to say that Maverick was not wonderful, because it was, but there's a line that has always stuck with me. Tom Skerritt's character Viper says to Maverick, "A good pilot is compelled to evaluate what's happened so he can apply what he's learned." And I thought about doing that in, a Tom Skerritt impression kind of voice, and I just don't have that.
That could have been cool, but I guess maybe not.
But that right there is leadership. Whether you're leading a company, a team, your family, or just yourself, things will go wrong. Processes will fail. Plans will change. But what defines you as a leader is what you do next. And if you're willing to take ownership, learn from it, and keep moving forward, I think, you're growing into the kind of leader who's worth following.
Yeah, and wow, there's such incredible wisdom in all that, Dylan. Thank you for sharing that. And I kind of go back to where you start, because the engineer brain in me wants to think it is about system and process. And like you said, it's really about people.
Yeah.
Leadership is about people. It's messy. Leadership is messy. People are messy. So I think that's really, really good advice on so many levels. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for bringing in the Top Gun reference too, and bringing in a little more aerospace to the Not Aerospace podcast.
Got to give it a little bit of that flair.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And so, to kind of segue out of that, there's another recurring piece that we've talked about that's going to be a book recommendation. Each week we'll ask Todd and our guests to share a leadership book that's impacted them. And so I wanted to take a chance on this inaugural episode to ask you, Todd, what's one of your go-to recommendations?
And there are so many, but I think if people come to me and say, what's my number one favorite leadership book, it has to be a book called The Advantage. It's by an author and speaker called Patrick Lencioni. Just, there's so many good things about this book. If you're I'm into Audible. I don't know if you're into Audible.
Absolutely.
But that's how I listen to books. But this is a great book for your next flight, because you're going to be standing in the TSA line for 4 hours anyway. So download the book, get out your AirPods and just stand in line and don't be frustrated. Listen to this book; it's awesome. The book explains. I won't give the whole book away, but I'll give the gist of it away because you can go right to his website and it's right there. It's all about organizational leadership, and Lencioni's theory is organizational health trumps everything else in business. It's more important than anything else. And it's really, there's 4 fundamental practices here, what he calls disciplines, that he talks about in the book. And the first one is building a cohesive leadership team. And he talks about what that means. And it's not that everybody on the team likes each other or is your best friend, because that rarely happens in business. But it's about building mutual trust and respect. And he goes into what that means. I won't go into all of it, but it's this ability and this trust that you have to say really difficult, hard things to other people, to tell them what you really think.
And I think what's interesting about that, Todd, is that a lot of people, I think, especially me in particular, growing up, I had this preconceived notion that to be a leader, like you're just pre-wired to have those conversations. And I learned, later on in my career, that's absolutely not true. And it can't. There are some that are wired that way, and that's great. And there are some that are not wired that way, and it takes work.
Most people aren't. Most people want to avoid the hard conversation, I think, because that's sometimes the easier path out, at least easier at the time. But real leaders on a real cohesive leadership team, they're brave enough, they trust each other enough to say what they really think. And that's so important in building that cohesive leadership team, to build that trust and respect. So that's number one. Build that cohesive leadership team. They trust each other enough to have the real discussions at the time about what needs to be said. And then the first job of that leadership team is discipline too. It's to create clarity. And there's a mission that the organization has, a goal they have, a direction, a set of projects, and all those issues, and it's creating clarity around those issues, and that really means total alignment. What Lencioni calls, there's no daylight between you. When the leadership team goes out in front of other staff, they're standing shoulder to shoulder, literally and figuratively, no daylight between them, and they create that clarity. Now, once you've created that clarity, the next discipline is to over-communicate it. You've got to say it to your staff, tell your company, tell your organization, this is what we're about, this is where we're going, this is the direction. And you communicate it, and then you communicate it again. And then when you think you're done, you communicate it again. It's over-communicate clarity. And the fourth discipline, you can guess it's about clarity too. It's to reinforce that clarity in all the systems in your organization. So, it's a couple of C's, right? Cohesive team and clarity, clarity, clarity. That's what this is about. It's a fantastic read. Kind of, if you're a Lencioni fan, like I am, you know that most of his books are kind of a leadership fable. He tells a story, and then you learn through the story that kind of comes out in the book. This book is not like that. It's different than his other books. It is just kind of a greatest hits where he pulls in a lot of those lessons from all the other books to kind of reinforce it. So it sounds easy on the top. Oh, really? That's all it takes to build a good company is create a great team and create and communicate clarity. I could do that. Well, it's a lot harder than you think. And if you think about some of the unhealthy organizations you've been a part of, you can probably think about situations where you're working with some coworkers and you're not quite sure what your role is versus what their role is because your leaders haven't fully clarified that, or
Sure.
You're not sure what's important. Maybe your business is not doing as well as you think it should be, and some things have to be cut. And are we on the same page about what stays and what goes and what's important? It sounds easy, but it's not. And I think a lot of us have been there.
Yes. I was just about to say, I think that some of the best leadership principles are the ones that are like, oh, well, that's really easy. Like, it can't be that simple. And in truth, it usually is that simple. We're just making it too complicated.
Yeah, and he works for a company. It's called the Table Group. That's his consulting company. And he's got a great podcast, too. So if you're looking for another great podcast on leadership, it's called At the Table. So that's my book recommendation today.
That's a good one. I've read that one, or I should say I've listened to it on Audible. Audible, if you're listening, you want to throw us a sponsorship. We are big fans of Audible, and we'll toss a link in the show notes to At the Table and this book as well. Todd, what else didn't we talk about today?
Well, probably you're going to be the moderator for the podcast. So, since it is our first one, we don't have a guest. Maybe you want to throw out some book recommendations too. Maybe you want to give us one.
Okay, if I can break the rule and recommend two books.
No, you're going to break the rules at the very beginning.
I mean, if not now, then when?
I don't know if the structured engineer in me can stand that, but I'll try to let it slip.
You got to see the gray.
I guess I got to see the gray. You're right. I'll let it go this time, Dylan.
Thank you. I actually have two that have really shaped how I think about leadership from totally different angles. And I'll tell you about the first one and the second one. The second book is a much more recent book that actually came out in October of 2025. So just about a month ago, if even that. And I just plowed through it on Audible. And so I had to include it in this. But the first is a book called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. And it's one that I think I referred to you, Todd.
Yeah, it's a great book. Yeah, you referred that to me. Read that a month ago or so. And a fantastic book if you're trying to build a brand and communicate. Really, really good book.
It's technically a marketing book, but honestly, it's just as much about leadership, in my opinion. The whole idea, as you know, is that your business or your team, you're not the hero in the story. The person you're serving is. And you're the guide who is charged to help them win. That mindset has changed the way that I approach both design and leadership. When you start leading like a guide by listening first and understanding what the problem is, and helping others succeed, everything else just seems to click. It's simple, it's clear, and honestly, it just works. And that's kind of what I said about At the Table as well.
Yeah, and like you said, I've read this book and highly recommend it. I will say, though, that something interesting about the book, and Dylan, you probably don't even know this. As I was reading the book, the author has this other kind of side hustle he does about an AI-generated kind of website to do AI branding automatically for you.
Wow.
Where you answer all these questions, like, I don't need a creative director like Dylan. I'll just use the AI. So I signed up for a week of his AI before I had to pay for it. I wasn't as impressed. I'll just say and maybe I'm old fashioned. I don't know. And, I've done in my former life at Siemens, did a lot of work with AI. So I'm very big on AI, and I've talked about AI a lot, and I believe it's coming. But in this case, I kind of liked working with the real person in the creative design process. I'll say, I don't know if I was so high on the AI, letting the AI take over and design my brand for me.
No knock on Donald Miller or the story brand principles or the framework.
Still a great book. Still absolutely recommend the book. Maybe you'll have more success with it. Maybe it was me. Maybe I didn't answer the prompts very well.
Don't tell him that. Selfishly, as a creative director, I am very happy that some people still prefer the human touch to it. But the second book that I talked about just a second ago, that one, like I said, actually came out in late October. It is called The Need to Lead by Dave Burke. And that's kind of a play on the need for speed from Top Gun. He is a former Marine Corps fighter pilot and Top Gun instructor. And if you read or listen to this book, you'll kind of get to take a peek at his resume, and it's worth its weight in gold just to listen to the resume, because this guy's got one. But this book is on how he approaches leadership from the opposite end of the spectrum of the first one that I recommended. This one kind of leans more into the pressure, precision, and accountability side of it. And he says that every problem is a leadership problem. And to my leadership corner earlier, he is absolutely right. This book is full of stories from aviation and combat, but the lessons can be applied everywhere. It's about taking ownership, staying calm under pressure, and leading where you are, not waiting for a title to show up to empower you to lead. And you wouldn't think it between the two if you were to look at them in Barnes and Noble or on Amazon. But these two books complement each other really well. One teaches you how to tell a clear story, and the other teaches you how to live it out with clarity, to your point, Todd, and with courage.
Now, this, I tell you, Dylan, as we were doing pre-production for the podcast, I saw this book. I've never read this book, but I'll tell you, I've already gone to my Audible subscription and downloaded this one. And I noticed something else cool about this book. There's a forward by, and I think maybe a co-author. I think he's a co-author, Jocko Willink.
Yes.
I've read a number of other of his books. He's a former Navy SEAL. and has done some really, really good books about leadership, probably some that I'll recommend in the future. But I can't wait to read this book for all kinds of reasons.
It's great.
Dylan, before we go, I kind of want to do a quick shout out to you. You did all the creative direction, and we've been working together now for more than a month. And I just want to say thank you for all the hard work you've done on the website, on the logos, on the brand, and everything. And I'll just say to listeners here, if you're looking for somebody to help you with the website, with brand, with something else, talk to Dylan. Dylan's great. You can see actual cool stand-up guy here on the podcast. Also, great interest in aerospace, so we're kind of kindred spirits there. But I just want to shout out to Dylan here on this first episode for all the hard work you've done to put all these assets together, and we'll put a link in the show notes to match his website. So thank you, Dylan.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate that, and it has truly been a very special project to get to work on. What the listeners can't see, because this is an audio podcast, I live on board Naval Air Station Lemoore with my wife, and I get to hear jets that you worked on fly over my head every day. So when you approached me about this project, it was one that I was very excited to be a part of. So thank you so much.
So how cool is that? Jet noise, the sound of freedom, and you hear it every day, right?
That's right. So like I said, thank you, Todd, and to everyone listening, thank you so much for taking the time to join in with us. This episode, the inaugural episode, this is just the start. Every episode will unpack the moments and decisions that shape us as leaders, be it at work, at home, and everywhere in between. Like we've said, our goal is simple: to help you lead better and climb higher wherever you are. If today's conversation gave you something to think about, and we hope it did, share it with your friend or a colleague who's on their own leadership journey, because we all are on one. And if you'd like to learn more about Rincon Aerospace or connect with Todd, you'll find all the links in the show notes or at Rincon, RINCON.aero. But for now, I'm Dylan Mitchell alongside Todd Tuttle. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.